Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Public Works for today, Monday, December 4th, 2017.
Commissioner Rivas, Repenning, James, Davis, and Jacinto are present. President James, we have a quorum. May we start with Bureau introductions, please, starting with Bureau of Street Services.
Good morning, Tim Tyson, Bureau of Street Services.
Anita Fernandez, LA Sanitation.
Good morning, Asad Al-Najjar, Bureau of Street Lighting.
Good morning, Frank Ronaldo with the Bureau of Contract Administration.
Good morning, Chris Johnson, Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, Ted Jordan, Public Works General Counsel.
Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. President James, we do not have any speaker cards under general public comment. We also do not have any commentary under the Neighborhood Council comment section. We did receive speaker cards on items 1, 2, 3, and 4 for today's agenda. In addition to that, item number 2, we received a series of emails that have been noted and distributed to all commissioners. And then also on item number 3, we did receive 6 separate emails that were printed and distributed to commissioners, and also a comment from CD11.
Regarding agenda item number 5, specifications submitted for board adoption and authorization to advertise for the invitation of bids in Council District 14 for the Highbury Pumping Plant number 604 Rehabilitation Project. The estimate's $2,200,820. The bid receipt date is January 17, 2018. Is there a second to my motion that we adopt agenda item number 5 forthwith by Commissioner Repenning and Commissioner Davis? Any objection? Without objection, we will do so. Is there a second to my motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the meeting of Wednesday, November 8, 2017 by Commissioner Repenning? Any objection? Without objection, we will do so. Let's go to the tree removal. Council District 4, 13441, Mulholland Drive. Recommending, what you got? Oh, okay. Which one's that? Oh. Okay. We're on number 3. 13441 Mulholland Drive, recommending that the board first find that the project is categorically exempt under Article 3, Section 1, Class 3, Category 1 of the city's Environmental Quality Act guidelines, and there is no substantial evidence the proposed project will have significant effect on the environment and is in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. 2, find that none of the exceptions to the use of the categorical exemption is set forth in Section 15300.2 of state CEQA guidelines apply. 3, specify that the Bureau of Street Services Urban Forestry Division, located at 1149 South Broadway, is custodian of the documents or other material that constitute the record of proceedings upon which the board's decision is based. And 4, review and approve the request for a fee permit to remove 4 coast live oak trees. Tree replacements are required. Mr. Tyson on number 3. Mr. Tyson, this is the agenda item that we're waiting for the letter of determination from the Mulholland Design and Review. What's the name of the Mulholland Design and Review Board?
Mulholland Design and Review Board,
Yeah.
President James.
We're still waiting for the letter of determination. I'm instructed.
That is correct.
And your bureau has asked for it?
That is correct. As of Friday last week, we tried to get it and still not prepared.
Okay. How many times have we asked for it?
We've been asking for it since October 19th. Actually, this came to board the first time on October 6th, and they were supposed to have the hearing on October 19th, so it was continued to after that. The first time continued to after that, and we still haven't.
Yeah, we continued it because I don't want to move forward without the letter of determination.
Correct.
I also don't think the council office wants to move forward without the letter of determination. I don't want to speak for them, but I could be wrong about that, but I don't think that that's the case.
And I think we should have that letter of determination.
Yeah.
Myself.
Well, we're going to have it. Here's the next question I have for you, and I'm sorry that you guys haven't gotten it yet. If you will get Cindy in my office the information on who to contact, I'll make the request myself and let them know that we're continuing the item because of that. Mr. Hall, are you here on number 3 on Mulholland Drive? Do you know anything about the Mulholland Drive Review Board determination letter? Okay. Mr. Hall, Tim, let me ask Mr. Hall a question. We'll note your speaker card in a moment. But you've worked with them a bit up there before. Any idea how long this would take? I'm inclined to call them myself and just say, hey, we keep continuing this item.
Usually doesn't take this long.
Okay,
I don't know what's going on, to be honest with you.
So in your experience, it's a bit of an unusual experience?
Yes, usually it's issued within 30 days.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. So what we're going to do then, Mr. Tyson, is if you'll get Cindy in my office, the information on who at planning I need to talk to, I'll call them myself and see if I can't help it along.
That'd be wonderful, President James.
And then just refresh my recollection. Have we had a hearing on this yet?
We have not read it at all.
Okay. We've been continuing it along, right?
For the letter, for the
Yeah,
absence.
well, I would be inclined to continue it along, but we've got 2 speaker cards, and Mr. Hall has taken, all these people that are on the list have put in speaker cards, have taken the time to come here today. So do this for me. Why don't you give us the summary of what's being proposed? We're going to hear from the people that put in their speaker cards because they took the time to come here today. And then we will have had the hearing, and we'll deal with this when we get the letter of determination on a subsequent hearing date, which I'm going to try and have happen before the end of this calendar year, but we will see. We're already in December. So go ahead, Mr. Tyson.
Okay. Well, good morning, President James, Commissioners, Bureau Representatives, City Attorney, and Executive Officer. Arishia Mahamodi, owner's representative, contacted the Bureau regarding construction of a single-family residence located at 13441 Mulholland Drive. The property owner is proposing to construct a single-family residence with a footprint of approximately 3,621 square feet on a vacant lot measuring approximately 11,143 square feet. The lot's topography slopes steeply downward from the street, and the property owner is required to implement slope stability measures in order to construct the residence. In response to Arishia Mohammadi's inquiry, he was directed to obtain services from the Los Angeles Municipal Code-defined tree expert to evaluate the subject trees. Mr. Mohammadi acquired the services of Shelley Sparks, registered landscape architect and certified arborist, to provide an assessment of the property and to address the project's impact to the protected trees. Ms. Sparks prepared a protected tree report in response to the request and submitted the protected tree report to the Bureau's review. Mrs. Sparks' site assessment reveals a total of 16 protected trees on the subject property. Mrs. Sparks determined that 8 trees numbered 6 through 9 and 11 through 14 will be severely impacted by the proposed construction and would require removal. The trees identified for removal are 4, numbers 6.
I'm sorry, would you read the trees available for removal again?
Ms. Sparks determined that 8 protected trees will be severely impacted by the proposed construction and will require removal. They are numbered 6 through 9 and 11 through 14. Trees identified for removal are 4 coast live oak trees and 3 Engelmann oak trees and 1 Southern California black walnut tree. The trees identified for removal measure approximately 7 to 19 inches in cumulative diameter by approximately 10 to 35 feet in height. All oak trees are in fair health, and the 1 Southern California black walnut is in poor health. The subject trees are within the within and or directly adjacent to the footprint of the proposed new home and residence and the driveway, therefore will require removal in order to construct the new residence. Mrs. Sparks recommends that the subject oaks and walnut trees be removed. The remaining 8 protected trees are to be preserved in place during the course of the construction, and protective fencing has already been installed. A Bureau arborist inspected the location on March 2nd, 2017. The arborist agrees with Shelley Sparks' tree assessment and recommendation that the removal of the 8 subject protected trees would be required. Alice Roth, Deputy District Director of the 4th Council District, as well as the Community Forest Advisory Committee, was informed of the tree removal request on March 13, 2017. The Council Office will notify the Bureau of any objections to the proposed tree removals prior to the board hearing. The applicant shall plant 24 24-inch box size coast live oak trees, and 20 1-gallon size or any acquired larger size California black walnut trees on site to replace the removed trees. The survival of the tree replacement shall be guaranteed for a period of 3 years by bond. If the board approves the protected tree removal, the tree removal permit shall be issued by BSS upon notification by the Bureau of Engineering that the bond has been posted. And that summarizes what's happening at Mulholland at 13441.
Okay, thank you, sir. And that's the one that we're waiting for the letter of determination from the Mulholland Design Review Board. I'll call these 3 speaker cards in the order in which they came in. Samantha Miller.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Miller, and I live at 13355 Mulholland Drive. Our greatest concern surrounds the protection of native trees, in particular, the native oak trees. In the notice of public hearing that was posted, it stated that the project does not propose any removal of any protected trees. Since the lot was purchased, multiple oak trees have been removed already, which, from our knowledge, were done without any oak removal planned and/or permit. As highlighted in the Oak Woodlands Protection Act, the conservation of oak woodlands promotes ecological balance, provides sustainable habitat for over 300 wildlife species and 2,000 plants, reduces soil erosion, sustains healthy watersheds and water quality, moderates temperature extremes, and aids with nutrient cycling, all of which improve the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents. Because of this, the future viability of hundreds of Californian species are dependent on the maintenance of biologically functional oak woodland ecosystems at local and bioregional scales. The untouched oak walnut woodland is incredibly important to the local wildlife, as the development is located directly above Dixie Canyon Park, a 20-acre Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. In the most recent proposal, 3 of the trees planned for removal are Engelmann live oaks, a particularly rare oak tree that is only found in the Los Angeles County of California. In LA County, only 32% of the 98,505 oak trees are Engelmann live oaks. If these plans are approved, LA County will have lost approximately 10% of the only living Engelmann live oak population, and an arguably detrimental number. In closing, we believe that due to the above reasons, the permit for oak tree removal should not be approved. Not only has damage already been done to the local environment due to the developer's illegal oak tree removal, but the young trees that the city will require the developer to plant will not be able to play the same role for the ecosystem's survival. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Minda Schechter.
Morning, Honorable Commissioners. Minda Schechter. I'm at 13460 Firth Drive, Beverly Hills Post Office, 90210. I'm a neighbor, and I'm very concerned about the basically disregard for the idea that we have protected trees, and yet there's even an issue, even a possibility to disregard the protection. The Santa Monica Mountains form a refuge for wildlife that it's trying to survive. There's less and less. We, the residents in the area, see deer and fawns, bobcats, possums, skunks, hawks, owls living in our neighborhood and benefiting from the ecosystem. And those of us who live there chose to be there because we're in the midst of nature. When we built our houses, the houses built there are odd shapes and so forth, designed to fit within the nature, within the trees, and preserve it. You don't design a house, buy a lot that's full of these treasured, protected trees, and then say we should remove them because the architect's plan is inconsistent with the environment and the nature of this area. This is such a treasured area of Los Angeles. How many cities have this? It's a wildlife, beautiful nature area, so part of the city. There's plenty of other parts of Los Angeles they could build in if they just want a big house on a big lot. And they should not be permitted to destroy this region for the residents, for Los Angeles, and for the wildlife, for one developer to take all that away. These cherished trees should not be removed putting little, one gallon tree is like this tall and will take another 50, 70 years if it even grows. We've had all kinds of blights. There's a lot of trees have died. Whether you have
2
no
minutes.
idea. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hall?
Good morning. Jamie Hall with Channel Law Group. I'm here on behalf of a group that was formed specifically to advocate for a better project, the Dixie Canyon Defenders. I'd like to focus my argument specifically on the environmental determination that is being proposed, and that is a notice of exemption. And that is very strange. Most of the time we get mitigated negative declarations, an environmental review that looks at all the reasonably foreseeable impacts and has environmental mitigation measures. I think the board is very well is familiar with that. And here we have a Class 3 categorical exemption that's proposed, and that's the single-family home exemption. And the exemption doesn't apply in this particular circumstance where there are environmental mitigation measures that are going to have to be adopted in order for this project to proceed. And it's just fundamental in CEQA that if you have an environmental mitigation measure, you cannot proceed with a notice of exemption. And then if that wasn't enough, there is an exception to the exemption. And that is when you're in a particularly sensitive environment. And it says these classes are considered to apply in all instances except where the project may impact on an environmental resource of hazardous or critical concern where designated, precisely mapped, and officially adopted pursuant to law by federal, state, or local agencies. So here, this project is actually in a designated wildlife habitat linkage zone. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy in May of this year put together a map that was officially adopted, and this project is located within habitat block number 13. So this is an area that is of critical concern. It's been precisely mapped by a local agency, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. So regardless of how before you even get to the merits of whether or not the tree removal permit should be granted, we first have to do the required environmental review. And we need an M&D. That's what we always see with projects of this type. And the great thing about the M&D is that we often get better results. And I'll just give you a short little preview of something that you may recall. I've been here several times before, a project in Studio City on Sunshine Terrace. Originally started with 37 protected trees proposed to be removed. You're going to find out in maybe about a month when we come back on a continued hearing that because of our advocacy, it's now one protected tree that's going to be removed. We started at 37, we ended at 1. And that's because of the alternatives analysis, the careful consideration, the requiring of the developer, and asking critical questions to modify a project so that it fits within the environment. We shouldn't just assume that because an architect has designed the plan that the trees necessarily have to be removed. Rather, the plan should be changed to conform to the environment. So we would ask you to require an M&D for this project. Thank you very much.
Well, don't go away yet, Mr. Hall. You brought it up, I didn't. On the Sunshine Canyon,
Terrace, yes.
or Sunshine Terrace, canyons and terrace, Sunshine Terrace, that one came here a couple of times, didn't it?
Sure did, absolutely.
Okay, so...
And the board played a critical role, and I'm just giving you just a tiny little preview of the fact that, my clients that come here are not project killers. They are project betterments. They like to make better projects. We really can have our cake and eat it too here, and we just really appreciate the board requiring the environmental review that results in better projects.
So you foreshadow what we're going to see, which is maybe an agreement from everyone, which is what we always try and get to.
Absolutely.
That said, this agenda item, what I'd like for you to do, you may have already done it, but for my oral record, because you know us pretty well, I've got to have Mr. Jordan's office listen back.
Sure.
And we don't have the Mulholland Design Review Board's letter of determination,
Sure.
so we're not going to vote on this today.
Absolutely.
But you all were here, so I wanted to have the hearing, at least so we get a sense of where you're going with this. could you give me the summary of why the exemption on this agenda item is insufficient? Because one thing you said is, well, we always do an MND. I've got to have more substance than that for us to be able to grab onto that. So if you can give me some more substance for our city attorneys to review, it would be helpful for us going forward.
Absolutely, and I remember, I indicated it, and I'm happy to provide the case law, but it's just like black letter law that if there is an environmental, you can't mitigate in order to get to an exemption. That's the summary. And I remember the case is called Salmon something.
You can email it to us.
Yeah, sure, but that's the reason why. Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Hall, what you might do, I don't know what our future hearing date's going to be because I'm going to have to call planning, but we're happy to receive one of your detailed as you want it to be letters on where we have an environmental misstep.
Okay. I did submit a letter on November 6th, and so it's in the packet, but I will supplement that to provide the citation to that you can't mitigate to an exemption.
That would be great.
Great.
Thank you. We have your
Thank you very
November
much.
6th letter.
And we appreciate everything that you're doing.
All right. Thank you, sir. So I would propose on this agenda item because I've got to call planning and figure out how long it's going to take to get this letter of determination. What's our last meeting before our recess? Is it December 18th?
That would be Monday, December 18th.
That's not a good day because I know a lot of other stuff that's on the agenda that day. That moves us to Friday, December 15th?
That's correct.
Let's try it. Let's put it on Friday, December 15th. And what I'm going to do for people in the audience that are here on number 3, if I get a sense from planning that we're not going to get the letter of determination by then we will send out a notice to the Mr. Tyson, to the applicant, and to Mr. Hall that that it's going to be continued to a date in 2018 at a point in time when we do get the letter. Okay, so we're going to shoot for December 15th. Thank you on agenda. So that'll be the order on agenda item number 3, unless there's objection. No objection. You have a card in? Yeah, your card. Your card came in late. Sir, you were here on time. You put in a card? So, what's your role? Are you the applicant? Okay, so come on up. We need your card, though. So we're going to put 2 minutes on the clock.
Okay.
And then you'll fill out a card for us.
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Eitan Gonen, and I'm a neighbor, 13449 Mulholland. There is a reason, gentlemen and ladies, that this particular property was not developed for the last 200 years through the up and down of all this real estate up and down. It's not suitable for development. Further along, the arborist did a very bad job. First of all, he didn't mention the trees that are already cut without a permit. And also, he didn't take into account what will happen when the heavy equipment goes in there. This property is extremely steep, and it's very difficult to do what the applicant wants to do. And the dirt will roll down on all the trees. And he didn't even touch on the stability of the ground. So, because it's so steep, the trees, the oaks and the walnuts love it. And that's why there's no a few trees there. It's a forest of oaks and walnuts. And you're going to destroy it totally. So what I suggest is that the board will delay it for maybe 6 to 12 months. And in the meantime, maybe the Santa Monica Conservancy will buy it from the applicant, which will be a better deal for him. We are not, trying to hurt him, but I think that'll be a better idea. Or another organization, this organization and other people will come up with some money and buy it from him. This is the unreversible disaster if we go ahead with the project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tyson, would you look into the issue about trees being removed without a permit? All right, thank you. Ma'am, you have a card in. Are you Mindy Mann? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good morning, honorable commissioners. I'm Indy Mann. I live in Benedict Canyon and just south of proposed development site, and I am a former BCA president, but I'm speaking on my own. As a resident of this area, I can attest that wildlife in our canyon has been extremely negatively impacted by the speculative development boom of the recent years. Destruction of trees has caused loss of wildlife habitat, and all of us see many fewer animals than we did previously. Large birds such as the red-shouldered hawk and the great horned owl, who require the very tall trees to nest in, have been left without nesting sites and are now gone from canyons where they have long been established. For the protection of wildlife, it is vital that we maintain our wildlife corridors and retain open space in the areas where it matters most, to allow wild animals passage, to find food and appropriate places to nest and reproduce. All of this is rapidly being lost as developers build massive retaining walls on hillside slopes and close off corridors animals have depended on. Excuse me. This development site is surrounded by preserved open space, the 20-acre Dixie Canyon Park to the north, and the 52-acre Long Ridge Park to the east. I understand the project was given a categorical exemption and therefore did not undergo an environmental review process by the city. Given the extremely sensitive location of the site, that exemption seems inappropriate to me, and the city should ensure that a proper environmental review of this project be completed. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. So those are all the speaker cards that we have, and sir, we'll accept your speaker card. Thank you very much. Those are all the speaker cards we have on agenda item number 3. It will be continued temporarily, at least optimistically, until the 15th of December when we get the determination from the Mulholland Design and Review Board. If we don't have the letter of determination, it will be moved over into 2018. So thank you, everyone, on agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 4 is a Bureau of Contract Administration, Bureau of Engineering, establishment of a pre-qualified on-call contractor list, emergency sewer and storm drain repairs. The Bureau of Contract Administration will report for board consideration on Cordich Construction Incorporated for final declaration as it relates to responsiveness to the pre-qualified on-call contractor list for emergency sewer and storm drain repairs. Mr. Sinai, I have a card in from you on this item. Do you want to be heard on number 4? Well, sir, oh, you want to see what the potential outcome is? Okay. Then we'll go ahead with that. Mr. Louie.
Good morning. My name is Richard Louie with the Bureau of Engineering, and I am here today on agenda item number 4. This item was originally heard at this board on October 30th, 2017, but was continued to allow staff to meet with Cordich Construction regarding the recommendation. It was again continued last Monday, November 27th, because of issues related to coordinating a time that works to meet. Since then, last week, staff has met with Cordich Construction, or representatives from the company, and Cordich was able to provide additional clarification on information that was submitted in their statement of qualifications. During the meeting with Cordich Construction, the representatives explained that their company was an outgrowth from a previous company, and that their company principal was a part owner of that previous company. So this company was an outgrowth of a previous company. Additionally, that previous company had performed sewer and storm drain repair work within the last 3 years, and that sewer and storm drain repair work was done on the previous a City of LA emergency sewer and storm drain repair contract, actual city jobs. Based on that clarification that was provided in the meeting, the city reviewed the statement of qualification evaluations. And after reviewing it, it was determined that the score in Section 3, which is BCA records, should be increased from 11.2 to 19.2 points. Additionally, in Section 5, work experience, the BCA SOQ average score should be increased from 2 to 8.5 points. Based on these revisions, the overall score of Cordich came to 74.58 points. It should be noted that no LBE points were added to obtain this 74.58 score. Basically, no LBE is necessary to obtain a passing score. Because the minimum passing score of 70 points or greater was achieved, staff recommendation now is that the board adopt the changes to the SOQ review table, transmittal number 3, as I just described, and then to recommend to approve Cordich construction for inclusion on the pre-qualified on-call sewer and storm drain repair list. That's my report if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Louis. So I'm assuming, since we don't have any Cordich representatives here, that they were notified of the result?
Correct.
Obviously, no reason to take their time to come down here today.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Louis? Commissioner Jacinto?
Thank you, President James. Richard, thank you for this. So we were able to get with Cordich, and they were able to provide additional information to their benefit, and we're going to, you're recommending to include them in a qualified list. The question goes to the same set of criteria that we applied to Gerbicon, that we were consistent in applying them to Cordich, and they were able to obviously meet the criteria.
That's correct. Yes, the criteria is projects within the last 3 years that have been performed, and we were able to review the records from Cordich, and were able to verify that actual city projects were done within the last 3 years.
And the personnel involved in terms of the principal, that issue?
It was a part owner in that previous
and we allow
company.
that?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacinto. Commissioner Rivas?
So for the revised score, the difference was that the current owner of Cordich was a co-owner of the previous company.
That's correct.
Right? And not just an employee
Correct.
of the previous company.
That is correct.
Okay. And so when we add Cordich to this list, are we going to just add them to the end? Are they going to be number, I don't know, whatever?
Right. That can be an option for the board. At the October 30th board hearing, we established a list for the sewer repair contract. There were 22 contractors that were selected. The board could potentially add Cordich Construction to the bottom of that list, if that's...
I recall that hearing, the determination was made, and Mr. Sinai was here on behalf of GerbCon, and Cordich was not here as that day, as I recall. However,
correct.
GerbCon agreed, just if we're going to get added, we get added on to the end. Cordich wasn't here to speak for themselves, so they acquiesced to that by not being here.
Correct.
And so they will be added on at the end of the list.
Okay.
Okay.
So just for the record, Fernando Campos, Executive Officer, if this board were to find Cordich responsive and to add to the list, you are correct. It would be number 23 to the emergency sewer list. However, they would be number 1 on the storm drain repair list, since that list is in reverse order.
That is correct.
So there's 2 lists that we're establishing.
That is correct.
It's fine. Okay. And that'll be Commissioner Jacinto? Okay. Commissioner Jacinto's made a motion. Before we do that, we have a speaker card. Mr. Sinai, I usually call them first. Because you've done an excellent job in your presentations, I have afforded you the ability to make your choice. Not everybody gets that, sir. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I would just like to address, I provided my speaker card because I do not know what the outcome of this is, of this particular determination is. But however, I have to say that the same standards were not employed, contrary to the representation of the of staff for GerbCon and for Cordis, because as is explicitly stated by them, they applied experience obtained in respect of another company with under separate license from one company to the new entity, which was not something that was afforded to my client. So in fact, had there been a situation where exactly the same criteria had been applied to all applicants, that combined with a acceleration of the next date, I think would have been a satisfactory situation for my client. But I don't think this is now a satisfactory situation because there has been movement from one but not the other. And in particular, what's particularly interesting is that it was only one project that managed to move the scoring that was identified by staff from a failing to a successful situation. In our case, my client was directly involved in supervision and running a project for the Percassin Company. But because of internal opposition, which was repeatedly brought up during the staff meeting when Mr. Jordan was present, the experience involving Percassin brought forth by the senior Mr. Gerbovac was disregarded. Primarily, we believe because of the familial relationship between a member of the.
You're arguing the stuff that was in the last hearing, not Cordage is on the agenda today.
Correct. Except the issue now, but until the final determination of how the criteria is applied to all applicants, I can't make an argument about whether or not the standards have been equally applied. As the last time I said, I had
so you made it and you're back on your family issue. Go ahead.
Right. That's precisely, I have to lodge it in. From our point of view, at this stage, given where things are progressing, we would have an alternative request. I think that would be satisfactory to us, which is that the idea was presented, and I believe has been agreed to, that there would be a reapplication period in 2 years. Based on the way the score
that was a compromise that we provided to your client.
That's correct. The 2-year period, though, was never, it came out of the blue to me. Nobody ever spoke to it. We appreciated that it occurred, and we're grateful that that kind of consideration would apply. But as we've seen how a single project can move the school.
It didn't come out of thin air. It came out of precedent that we had done on other issues. Go ahead.
Not where I had ever been involved. So I guess it was from.
This is your only issue that you've been to this board in the last 5 years, but go ahead.
That is correct. I'm not a regular participant in these meetings. So the question that the proposal that we would have that I think is particularly appropriate given the fact that a single project can move the score from quite dramatically would be to accelerate the reapplication period to 1 year, because based on what we have now understand from the scoring mechanism, we would, based on the new projects we've obtained and are currently performing since the cutoff date, we would be ready to be able to apply in June and come up with a score that is the equivalent of everybody else. So from that point of view, we think we would be able to get into a situation that's reasonable and meets the minimum experience levels. And I think that's particularly important given the fact that we've now seen an adjustment for Cordage. And I'm not necessarily saying that the people in Cordage are unqualified. That is not my statement. But we believe that to the extent that that this body is attempting to make deviations to account for the fact that the mechanism for applying for determining experience looks mostly just at entities and not the personnel, giving us a chance to reapply in 6 months will essentially, I think, bring us to the same to a
Time.
level that is equivalent to everybody else in terms of consideration.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So we have a motion on the floor regarding Cordage. I would second it, along with Commissioner Repenning. Any objection? So Cordage will be added to the list accordingly. Dr. Campos, you want to add something?
I would. Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. So the motion that this board has considered right now, there's a first and a second by Commissioner James, is to declare Cordage construction to be responsive and to add them to the list. They would be added as item number 23 to the emergency sewer and then item 1 to the storm drain. There's also the pending motion, or there could be a pending motion that this board could consider, and that is to make the official declaration that Gerbicon Incorporated to be non-responsive based on the report and the discussions contained today in this testimony. So in other words, we would need a second motion.
Well, but didn't we cover GerbCon last time?
No, this board opted to remove both Gerbicon and Cordage off the responsive list so that you would have the opportunity to make those discussions today.
If I may, I believe on the hearing on November 27th, the board adopted the recommendation
Yes.
to declare GerbCon and Honest Plumbing, Inc. to be
That's the
non-responsive.
intent of that was the intent of the board.
I think the only thing we had today was the Cordage.
And that's why the agenda says so. Mr. Louie? That's right. I mean, you can go back and listen to the hearing, Mr. Campos.
Give me 1 second, Mr. President. Let me just go through my records here.
No. I'm sure you were. I know what happened.
So, Mr. President, thank you for the pause and thank you for just making sure that I have my notes correct. So on November 13th, we did remove both Gerbicon and Cordage from the list. However, on November 27th, which was a day that I was not here, so that's where my lapse in connecting these items arose. And on that date, on November 27th, this board did add in Gerbicon to the declaration and made them non-responsive. So the item pending before us is only for the Cordage. So my apologies.
Okay. So the motion before us is to add Corbett to the list. That motion has been seconded by myself and Commissioner Repenning. Without objection, that will be the order. Any issue sending it forthwith? We will send it forthwith. There's no other motion on the floor regarding the issue of reopening the list in 2 years. The list will be reopened in 2 years per the motion that was made on November 27th that was approved and sent back forthwith. Are you square on all that, Mr. Louie? Okay. So we're clear on agenda item number 4. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in number 4. Let's go to agenda item, let's see, we've done 3, 4, and 5. So we have 1 and 2 left. Number 1 is going to get to go first because they have been coming here longer. So agenda item number 1, Council District 1, hearing and change order number 113, Los Angeles Police Department, Police Academy Project, replacement training facility and administration, building cafe and 4 shooting ranges, renovation. And without reading through, we are hearing again, as we have had hearings on August 25th, September 13th, October 16th, October 30th, and November 13th. Mr. Kawaguchi, I understand you finally have good news to report on the final commission report regarding the HVAC system at the police station.
Good morning, Commissioners, Bureau Heads, Mr. Jordan, Mr. Campos. My name is Alan Kawaguchi. I'm with the Bureau of Engineering. And yes, we'd like to report that the punch list was completed. The contract items, or all the contract items were completed, which includes the punch list items, which were completed on November 14th. And the AC system for the training facility, our commissioning agent on Friday notified us that it meets the design specifications. The final report will be submitted probably later this week, but his email suffices or meets what I need in order to accept the project. The as-built drawings and the O&M manuals for the AC system were just submitted to us on Friday, so we're reviewing those at this time, but I'm pretty sure that Kemp will complete whatever comments we have in terms of getting us those, because we'll need those in order to maintain the units on it. So with that, all the contract work is completed, if anyone has any questions.
What's left?
Pardon?
What's left? Anything?
No, that is all the contract items have now been completed.
Okay. So let's go through the Alan, what's your understanding of where we are? We need to have the closure of the settlement hearing to try and get this thing wrapped up. We have the representatives from Kemp. All your representatives are here? Okay. We released $750,000 back to them 2 weeks ago, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that was being retained. We also were at a point where, and so the HVAC issue is gone, the rock garden issue is gone. We had put on the table, and I know their counsel will let us know their understanding of this, roughly the $1.2 million, $1.1 million.
I think it was $1,058,000
Yeah,
was the last number that was on the table.
Right, that was
Kemp Brothers came back, I think, because you had asked them, I think in September, for them to counter it. They came back with a $1.5 million.
I asked them to come back.
So those are the two numbers
And
that are out there.
they came back with a $1.5 million.
That is correct.
Whoever you would like from Kemp, I probably want to hear from the attorney on Kemp. We're at $1,058,000. You're roughly at $1.5 million. We're happy to hear you.
Good morning. Richard Trop.
Recognizing that both sides have moved, so.
But not counsel for Kemp, consultant for Kemp.
Okay.
Just to make the record clear. At the original hearing, the board put an offer on the table of roughly $1,058,000. You had asked that we provide a counteroffer to that, and on September 1st.
Well, that's because we had moved up, so I wanted you all to move down.
And we did a significant movement on that September 1st counteroffer with the reasons for doing so as well.
You did.
So from that point, procedurally, that's where we are. We've been continued several times for work issues to be performed, the HVAC units, we all know about that. As of today, that's all been completed and acknowledged by the Bureau. So frankly, at this point, we're waiting to hear the board's position in response to our counteroffer of $1,526,000.
Okay. I'm going to take 1 second, if I could. Mr. Jordan? We have some revised recommendations from the Bureau of Engineering that are part of. Alan, can you come up, Mr. Kawaguchi? Were these in any way part of a revised board report?
Yeah, I think at the original hearing date, you had said we could submit in you wanted the Bureau of Engineering maybe put in another board report?
Right.
And I thought what might be easier is for
just
that
to revise the key part?
Yeah, sort of the recommendations we had, since things have changed in terms of what we originally recommended at, so many hundreds of thousands, you change the numbers. So these kind of follow through the same items. Some items drop away, obviously, because of the number that you'd be offering. So those would be the revised recommendations that we would have at this point.
Okay. These are part of a public record as part of a revised board report.
It would be once you read it into record.
Well, I'm about to.
Then it would be, yes.
Yeah. So these are, I'm going to read in these 4 revised recommendations for the folks at Kemp, and then I'm going to make a motion that we can discuss, colleagues, on trying to resolve this matter. The revised recommendations from the Bureau of Engineering. Authorize the city engineer to issue construction change order number 113 and construction change order number 250 to Kemp Brothers for a total amount not to exceed $1,200,000 for additional calendar days associated with unforeseen site, underground utility redesign, mechanical shaft redesign, transformer and pedestal for fire water booster pump redesign, late construction payment, and disputed change orders. Authorize $1,071,473 in additional contingency for the Los Angeles Police Department Academy Project, Replacement Training Facility, and Renovation Project. Third, receive and file the disputed change order log. Fourth, acknowledge that this is a full and final settlement concerning work scope and time matters asserted in the Kemp Brothers claim of $1,803,848.53 for all work performed by Kemp Brothers. Labor, wage, and subcontractor compliance review by the Bureau of Contract Administration are not part of the settlement, which that always comes along later anyway. Mr. Kawaguchi, can you come up? So I'm going to tell you what my thought was, but I want to see how these numbers in your revised square with what I'm recommending. So the $1.2 million in number one and the $1,171,000 in number two, what do those represent?
At this point, any change order over 100,000 we need the board's approval.
Yes.
At the same time, we've expended almost all the funds that we have in the project. So
you're just dealing with getting the budget clear.
Yes. So if you issue a change order, we have no area to grab the money from.
Fine.
So by increasing the change order.
So if I put a number on the table, these numbers need to be revised accordingly to settle it in your budget.
That is correct.
Got it. Okay. So Kemp, are you clear on that? Okay. So my recommendation that we put $1,058,000 on the table. I think that was Commissioner Jacinto's initial motion that my recollection is I probably seconded it. Off of what was around $800,000 initially. They came down from 1.8 to 1.5 roughly. I would recommend that we settle this by adding $300,000 to this to make it $1,358,000 and whatever that change is. Do I have a second on that or thoughts on that? Well, we can have a discussion on that. And let me tell you why. The reason is at least twofold. Most and primarily is the fact that the project's now done. Correct, Alan? We've got the project done. We've got the satisfaction from the Bureau that the project is complete. I know that we had some difficulties, obviously. We're here today trying to settle these last change orders. But the Bureau everybody had a pretty good working relationship, other than we came to the kind of the end of this closeout stuff. And we'd like to work with Kemp again. And the report that I got on the quality of the work, other than this rock garden issue, which was a $12,000 issue or whatever, was satisfactory to my recollection. Compromise settling cases is a lot easier than trying them. Compromise requires a little bit of pain from both sides. We move first, Kemp moves second. Now that we've got the project finished, I'm completely comfortable putting an additional $300,000 on the table to get this revised, or to get this settled and closed. Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. After considering where we were at in the original board report, which was really at actually $523,000, knowing there's a deductive of portion, and where we moved originally, and in order to create, I think, a prime construction company pool that we could work with in the future, I think it's important that we do settle on it. It is with that hope that I do support your motion, and that we can settle at that $300,000 extra.
I also think that obviously we know that while we may dispute some aspects of the Kemp Brothers claim, and I don't want to make any admissions that relate to that, I do see merit in some of their points, and that's the reason that we would like to resolve this and the reason that we've put additional money on the table. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in terms of us managing this Prop Q funds and the numbers of different prime contractors that we've had involved over the years, that Kemp Brothers probably is the newest company, and this is their first time experience in working with us. And as you have stated, Mr. President, as time has bared out, they have performed successfully at the end of the day. So I certainly can support us giving them the amount that you have recommended, and I strongly do believe that their experience with us will increase, and given the fact that this was their first experience, I think overall they did a good job, notwithstanding the challenges that have occurred.
Okay, anybody else? So I've got 3 votes without taking a vote. I know I've got 3 votes based on the oral statements here, gentlemen. So your thoughts on the 1.35? Yes, of course you can. If you want me to take another item, I can take another. Okay, it may take a while. 30 minutes? Okay. So let's, I know that's a little unusual for us, but having a hearing like this is a little unusual for us. I think it's the first time in my 4.5 years that we've done something like this for the people that are in the room and those that might be listening. So what I would do, Mr. Jordan, I know that makes you uneasy, I'd like to recess from agenda item number 1 for Kemp Brothers to hopefully accept our offer and move to agenda item number 2 and get that matter resolved, and then come back and close out number 1.
I think that's fine. I have no issues with that. I think the record is very clear.
Great, thank you. Not to be dismissive of my 2 colleagues when I had the 3 votes on at least putting that much money on the table. Any discussion on that, though? Okay. We'll see. We haven't taken a vote either way, so I wanted them to know that we at least have that amount that they can discuss. Let's go to agenda item number 2. Agenda item number 2 is a tree removal permit. Tree removal at 694 North Walther Way, recommending that the board find that the project is categorically exempt under Article 3, Section 1, Class 3, Category 1 of the City's Environmental Quality Act guidelines, and there is no substantial evidence that the proposed project will have significant effect on the environment and is in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Number 2, find that none of the exceptions to the use of a categorical exemption set forth in Section 15300.2 of state CEQA guidelines apply. Number 3, specify that the Bureau of Street Services Urban Forestry Division located at 1149 South Broadway is custodian of the documents or other material that constitute the record of proceedings upon which the board's decision is based. And number 4, review and approve the request for a fee permit to remove 3 California sycamore trees. Tree replacements are required. This is the infamous trees number 1, 2, and 3. The 2 trees in the front, Mr. Tyson, we'll start with you. 2 trees in the front, correct?
That's correct, President James.
And 1 tree in the back?
That's correct.
So this had the outstanding issue of alleged disease related to the trees. Am I right about that?
That is correct.
And the last hearing that we had, and so I don't know what I'm going to do about speaker cards, because we have been here 3 prior times, and we've had speakers on this item already. So let's see where we are with the tree disease issues. We had, last time I remember, we had one side, the applicant side, saying that the trees are diseased, in essence. We had the opponent side, community members and such, saying that the trees are in viable condition and they're not diseased. And we had arborists from both sides. And the way that the board elected to determine a resolution was to send our Bureau of Street Services Urban Forestry Division to do an independent DNA analysis. Am I right about any of that or all of it?
You're correct about all of it, and if you'd like, I can just kind of, at first...
You can take off there.
Yes, thank you. The trees were first diagnosed by the applicant's tree expert that he saw that the trees had Armillaria malea. So the opponents had Carl Mellinger, he's a tree expert as well, and he sent in samples from the 3 trees, as well as the applicant had Dr. Heather Valliere look at the samples. They both came back with there was no presence of Armillaria malea. However, Dr. Heather Valliere identified Phelinius innocuous and spores in the wood. So with that, we decided with the board that we should do a further study and have these sent out to an independent laboratory when we chose Bartlett Tree Experts, which are nationwide. The Bartlett Tree Experts Laboratory did DNA samples on all 3 trees, all on the east and west side of the trees. One of the reports says north and south. That was a misprint. And what was found was the fact that we sampled tissue from the material collected from both the east and west sides of the trees and extracted DNA from it in order to test for the presence of decay fungi. DNA extraction and polymers chain reaction testing was negative for the presence of Phelinius innocuous and Ganoderma. We did note a 200 base pair band on the gel, possibly indicating the fungus Hericium. Hericium is also called lion's mane. Now, they found no actual decay in the trees. The spore may be present on the outside. This kind of spore attaches itself to decay, and that's how the mushroom grows, is on the decay of the wood. We did a full inspection of the trees. We made sure that there was no cross-contamination between the samples, as we used a 50-50 solution in between trees to clean our tools, and everything was done properly. So at this point in time, the Bureau recommends to the Board of Public Works.
First of all, are the trees viable or not viable?
Yes, they are viable. At this point in time, there's no decay presence that's noticed in any of the 3 trees.
All 3 of the trees are viable?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
But I would like to say...
Of course. Okay. I just wanted to get that part clear.
Just like with any tree in the landscape, especially mature trees, you need to have those trees inspected every 3 to 5 years just to know that they're safe, or if there's anything going on with those. And that's what's recommended by Bartlett Tree Experts, is just recommending a cycle of inspecting the trees to ascertain what kind of condition they are through their years. Now, we talked about trees number 1 and 2 with the slight modification to the driveway the last time we were here, which was actually agreed upon by the applicant to retain those 2 trees.
At the time, yeah.
Preservation would be you're not touching the trees whatsoever. They stay in their normal condition just like they are. You don't touch roots, you don't touch a tree. These trees are being retained, as they will need to sever some roots. Now, roots, you have the protection zone, which is the outside of the canopy of the tree, called the drip line, plus 10 feet, or any more footage that you can get is even better. The critical root zone is 3 to 5 times the width of the trunk of the tree at diameter at chest height. So 2 of the trees out front that are around 24 inches in diameter, you would want to be at least 6 feet away from the trunks of those trees to cut roots. And I think that's within reason of what they need to do with the driveway out front. Now, tree number 3 in the back is still positioned in the footprint of the home. So unless it's deemed that they will change the structure of the home and be at least, this tree's larger, so they would need to be somewhere around 10 feet away from the trunk of the tree, and that would be with an arborist watching the careful severance of any roots, and that would only be on one side of the tree if they were to do that, which would be the foundation of the home, would be allowed. So with it in the footprint, that, however, is not possible. So our recommendation right now from the Bureau to the board is trees number 1 and 2 can be retained with minimal engineering around the trees, and an arborist needs to be there to watch and make sure what is severed by the roots. And tree number 3 should be allowed to be removed unless you are going to change the home footprint. So that's what we've come to today, and that was basically where we were the last time we were here.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Tyson before we go to the speakers? Anybody? Okay. Thank you, sir.
One more thing, if I
Yes.
might add. If they were able to allow the removal of the one tree, they would be planting 4 brand new sycamore trees on the property. And if you want to keep the trees alive for an extended period of time, you don't keep 3 trees that are all the same age that are all going to expire and decline and die at the same time. It'd be nice to put some new trees in there. So maybe 20, 30 years from now, when the other 2 trees are old and ancient and in a declining state, you have 4 there to replace it, and you're never without trees. Thank you.
Okay. One moment, Mr. Tyson. Commissioner Repenning.
Tim, I'm sorry, the third tree is, so last time we met, there were design modifications that had been brought forth by the owner of the property, correct?
Only for the driveway that I'm aware of.
That would allow 2 of them to be saved.
Correct.
And the one in the back, in their current plan would still go.
Would require removal with the plan that they have right now.
Okay. To your point about adding new sycamores on site, if the third tree is removed, is there room? Because that was an issue previously where it seemed like people weren't quite sure where they would actually go.
I've been to the site myself, inspected the trees myself. There is room to plant 4 trees.
I would also like to say that people could always plant trees as well without having to remove them. To your point about a mixture of age, I want to make sure that we're not saying that the only reason people would plant new trees is because they're removing.
Absolutely. We need to think about planting trees all the time so that we have a diverse forest. Just in fact, if something does come in, a disease, an insect, something like that, where it attacks maybe one species, or different trees that are elderly start dying, and you need to have young trees. You need to have 3 kinds of trees: young, middle-aged, and very mature. So these trees are at the end of their middle-aged and going into very mature with their age. So it would be a good advice to start planting trees up in this area, as all the trees up in this area that I see that are sycamores are all relatively the same age.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Repenning. So we have, I've got 3 cards on each side. So let's start with Helen Ann Hirsch. I know that we've had hearings on this, but come forward. We do have new information today, so.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak again. I'm going to make it short and sweet. I know that there's been a lot going on in this issue. We're not against development here. I mean, Brentwood Hills is a great area, but it's an area in transition. I mean, a lot of these homes are 50, 60 years old. Folks are allowed to buy property and build new houses. All we're asking for is that folks respect the law, which is the protected tree ordinance when they design their homes, and that they respect the environment when they do it. And there has just been so much gamesmanship in this. This whole back and forth has just been, kind of crazy making with all of this tree healthy, tree not healthy. And if you just think of the tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars that have been wasted on this whole health issue, which with all due respect has frankly just been a ruse from the very beginning. And I really just think, and the community just really hopes, that the commissioners understand that their decisions here really speak to what's going on with this developer, but frankly, developers in the entire community. I mean, most of them, 99% of them, are respecting the protected tree ordinance and creating homes that include that in their design. And I just think that as far as the precedent goes here, I really hope the commission consider going forward, that they just say, hey, listen, develop your homes, create beautiful homes, make some money in this case, since we know it's a developer doing it, despite the fact that for some reason they're putting forth someone as an owner. But please just respect our laws and the environment when you do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Marjorie Platzker.
My name is Marjorie Platzker, and I'm a director on the board of Brentwood Homeowners Association. We represent 3,000 or plus homes in Brentwood, and I've been on the board for 8 years. I'm also a neighbor. I live at 654 Walther Way, and we've lived in that house for 43 years and enjoyed it tremendously. So I'd like to speak on behalf of tree number 3, and I'm happy to submit a photograph from our backyard of that tree. It's the most majestic, beautiful tree in the neighborhood. It was planted in 1964. I'm also on the Design Review Board at Brentwood, the DRB. I was appointed in 2016 by Councilman Bonin. So I speak as a neighbor and a member of 2 prominent boards in Brentwood in favor of preserving and protecting tree number 3 and developing a home that would be in compliance with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Lisa Chadwick.
Good morning. As I said from the first meeting that we're here, like this is our 4th one, the first one, I grew up.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's my new job being here. I grew up in Sullivan Canyon where all those trees were chopped down. Sycamores were all just chopped down. Now I feel like I'm in the same situation. These are beautiful 3 sycamore trees that, again, were built in 1964 when I was born. And I think splitting and making a deal, save these 2, get rid of one, I don't think that's the case. I don't think we should be doing that. We need to save all 3 healthy trees. The developer bought this property knowing that there were protected trees. He bought another property on Tiger Tail where there are protected trees, where he chopped down 4 beautiful oak trees. He got fined. Then he goes and he buys another piece of property on Walther, knowing again. And here he's trying to chop those down, saying that the trees were not healthy. Obviously, that's not the case. They're all 3 healthy trees. The 3rd one is the most magnificent one. And he can build a house around that tree. He can. It's that simple. It's an 18,000 square foot lot. So I'm telling you that we don't want to save 2 and get rid of 1. We want to save all 3. A house was there before, 3,800 square foot house was there with 3 of those trees. He can build double that amount and save that tree. So, thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Diner Harris.
Good morning, Commissioners. Debbie Diner Harris from CD11. There should be in your file an email or letter from Councilmember Bonin. I'll say it again. The council member would like to save all 3 trees. We've heard the trees are healthy. The only question before you now is reasonable development. This property can be built with a reasonable development, but with a house that looks a little bit different. The lot is big enough. People are incredibly creative. We have people building houses off the sides of cliffs on landslide properties. It is absolutely doable. And the developer has said from the very beginning, oh, this is wrong, I can't do this, I can't make this work. And all along it's been shown that's not quite the facts. The facts are the trees are healthy. The facts are that all 3 can be saved. The facts are that the house can be designed to accommodate those trees. And we hope that you will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. On the Mr. Rostamian, and you have 2 people with you. How much time do you think you need, sir? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, take up to 10 minutes if you need it for the 3 of you.
Thank you again for your time. This is the fourth time we're here, and regarding the health of the tree, it's true we've gone back and forth, and everyone has gone back and forth, both sides, the city, as far as whether the trees are healthy or not. And I don't think it's I don't think that's a closed issue. Just for the record, I think that there's some evidence of fungus, and our arborist can speak to it. However, on the second point, which is the reasonable development of this lot, we've been hearing from the neighbors for the last 4 months that they can build a home around it. They can build a home around it. They must be able to build a home around it. But there's been no evidence whatsoever from any of the neighbors or their architect that a home can be built around. What we have put in the record from our architect, from our arborists, from our contractors, is that there's no redesign of this home that can work. And we put in the record, and I submitted last Wednesday in a timely way, a report of our architect, Cliff Nyman, who looked at multiple redesigns of this property. And what the neighbors are ignoring is the sloping of the lot, the grading of the lot, the topography of the lot, how the lot is situated. It's not a flat lot where you can say it's an 18,000 square foot, you must be able to build around this tree. Let's look at where the tree is. Let's look at the sloping. Let's see if there's really a way you can do it. And what you have in front of you, and this is a poster board of it, is 3 potential redesigns. This is 1, 2, and 3. And we've tried a different manner in each case to try to get around tree number 3. This is a slope line, this dark line, that cuts through more than half of the lot, okay? This is the tree number 3, and this is the drip line that the city told you have to stay clear of, plus 10 feet, okay? In every scenario, that tree takes up probably more than half of the home, okay? And when you look at reasonable development and is this home too big, I put some statistics here. Our home at 4,500 square feet above grade is 12% less than the average of all of the abutting homes, okay? The floor area ratio, which measures how much of the home you take, by right we have 40%, we're occupying 19%, and the average in the neighborhood, we're 32% less than the average. So we're not building a home that's a McMansion, as people call it. Absolutely not. We're building above grade. There's a basement of, I think, 2,000 square feet or something like that. But above grade, in terms of the footprint, we are far less than all of the abutting homes. We've done that research because we want to show the commission that we're not here to build a monstrosity that is out of sync with the community, and we're not looking to destroy trees that we don't have to destroy. There's a tree number 4, by the way, that came up in one of these hearings. We never made an application for it because it's not in the way. I think it's off to one of these corners. But tree number 3 is absolutely within the footprint, and our architect will tell you all of the different ways. These 3, by the way, violate all sorts of different city requirements that we would need to amend and modify. So these are not actually doable in terms of city regulation, and they still make it impossible to build any type of home there. The reason the prior home was built is built in 1955, and our arborist will tell you that tree number 3 at that time was probably the size of this post. And right now, if that home existed there, it would probably be unsafe because it would have been in the drip line of that tree, and it would have been really an unsafe condition to be living in that house, according to the city's requirement of how many feet you have to stay away from the tree. So again, this is the 4th time that we're here. We heard from the commission that today we'll get it decided, and we hope that that's the case. But tree number 3, as you can see, is right in the middle, and I think it bears mentioning that tree number 1 and 2, which are in the front, there's a retaining wall right under it. And I'd like you to hear from our arborist and from our architect about why the drip line of those trees would infringe on this grading, on this retaining wall, and would require significant cutting of roots and damage to the trees, such that trees number 1 and 2, as much as we would like for them to be retained, we don't believe that architecturally, legally, that they can be kept there. So unless the commission has questions, I'd like to have our architect who prepared all of these drawings speak to the commission, and if there's any specific questions, for him to address those.
That's fine. Any questions for Mr. Rustanian before we go to the architect? Okay, the architect, I think, is
Cliff Nyman.
Cliff Nyman.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Cliff Nyman.
Good morning.
Morning. Registered architect. I've been practicing in Los Angeles since 1980, so it's been a while. We've done a lot of hillside type of projects. I'm also on some neighborhood council and boards and all those sorts of things, so I see both sides of this issue often, unfortunately. But in this case, what we did was, it is a large lot, but what most people are not at is that this is the total slope. Actually, but it's a drop from this corner to the northwest corner to the southwest corner. It's relatively level across the top, and then there's a drop of about 10.5 feet from the northeast corner to the southeast corner. And believe it or not, it's kind of more so here, where it's another 5 or 6 foot drop from the total slope here down to the southwest corner. So basically, effectively, it makes only about half the site buildable in the conventional sense if you want to meet the street level without going down 16 feet. So, right, Max, that tree is not quite in the middle of this sort of buildable portion of the lot. What compounds this even further is that there is a highway dedication of 3 feet, and then there's a setback of 12 feet, none of which were in place in 1964 when the house was built. Interestingly enough, per the arborist report, I did a section through the house, the way that tree would look in 64, and literally it was this tall, and it was, maybe 8 feet or 10 feet from the face of the house. If you took that house that existed there prior and built it today to today's requirements, the setbacks, and the highway dedication, it would be on top of that tree, basically. So that same footprint moved to fit today's requirements wouldn't work. I don't really think that the existing house would work because, again, it's about 8 feet from the center of the tree. The tree is about 2.5 feet thick. Once you dig the foundations, the minimum width per OSHA or whatever is about 6 feet. You have to short. If you did you add that, now you're 2 feet from the center line of the tree, and the tree is 2.5 feet in diameter. So basically, you're on top of the tree, even constructing the house that was there prior. If you constructed it today, again, when they put that tree in 64, it was just a little sapling and not hard to actually install. So, assuming that it's a flat site, maybe that's a different question, but it is far from a flat site. Again, this is very quite steep. In addition, because of the soil and all that, there's all these drainage issues. You have to install a sump here to get the water out of this corner, meaning that'll interfere with root structures and things like that. There's a whole host of those kind of implications. With respect, if I could just address morning. Again, the southern end of the house is pushed north because of the 12-foot setback. I think prior was probably 5 or 6 feet. Took that exact same driveway, now you'd be well within the drip line and maybe just a few feet from the tree. You can actually see the roots of this tree protruding through what was an existing wall holding up the eastern side of the house. So what happens is, because of the drop between the corners here on the eastern corner, the original house, as is the new house, is a tuck-under parking, taking advantage of the approximate 10 or 11 foot drop in grade. Okay? So, but that necessitated a retaining wall being built for the original house to hold up, the first story of the original house. That same concept has to apply today as well, only obviously it's going to move north because the whole house had to move north, and it's pretty close to that tree line. I'm not an arborist, but what I've seen over the years is getting that close to the tree is kind of problematic. I can tell you that it's more than problematic with tree number 3. When you just do the math, this is about 30 subtract, the drip line and you subtract the setbacks, I mean, you're going to have a house that's, 15 feet wide, which I think is about half the width of a double wide trailer, which I don't know that that's reasonable development in this part of town.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Rivas?
We received a letter from another architect, Martin Gelber, right? And he had suggested that the third tree can remain and that a courtyard could incorporate the tree. I just want to hear your opinion on that proposed design.
I saw that. And so, again, that presumed the flat site. So I drew a courtyard just to test the theory. And number one, I drew it 12 feet from the center of the tree, which is, that tree won't survive because 6 of that 12 feet is the, kept it 6 feet from the center line of the tree and then 6 feet for whatever trenching is required for the foundation. That puts it 12 feet from the center of the tree, which is less than half of the required distance you're supposed to keep away from the center of the tree, which is 27 plus 5, 32. So we're well within that zone that will damage the tree. But more importantly, if you look where the corner of the U or the courtyard is, it's well past the toe of the slope, and I did a quick look at the topography. That corner is 16 feet down. If you build a typical 3-story house, you're over the height limit, and basically 2 stories of it is basement. So it was a totally flat site, out in the valley somewhere, possibly. On this site, in my opinion, no.
Thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
It had been discussed that potentially, in looking at the architectural plan and designs, going back to the drawing board again, another design could be implemented for the client that would allow us to save each of the 3 trees. In terms of the possibility of that, the potential innovation for that, do you think that that could happen? And I know that cost certainly would be an issue, but what is your professional opinion?
My professional opinion, particularly with tree number 3, is it can't be saved under that premise. Again, one thing I did which was interesting after the fact, I took the original house and I superimposed it on the proposed house. They were almost in the same place. And the reason they're almost in the same place is because that's where you need to build the house. This is an L-shaped house because it's taking advantage of the grades. It's very steep, internal portion over here. I tried 3 different alternatives to capture that. One of the premises, though, was to grade the toe of the slope over here because once you pass that toe of the slope, you have basement essentially. So I don't think that's an appropriate solution. So we took roughly the square footage, say approximately 3,000 square feet, put them in these blocks. That's the nice thing about computers. You can move them around. And that's exactly what we did. And each time we were well within that drip line, in most cases about 10 feet from the center of the tree or less. And again, given the parameters for construction, the minimum width is going to be 6 feet for excavation. And if you're another 6 feet, I mean, you're into the tree root structure. It won't survive. Again, that's from an architect standpoint, but it's far too close. And all the recommendations are to keep the house approximately 32 feet away from the center of that tree, and all these put it within anywhere from 6 to 12 feet from the center of the tree.
So in your professional opinion, there is no potential innovation that could take place to create a nice property for the client to consider, given the concern about the trees. I know that perhaps you have structurally prepared something that is of satisfaction to the client, but I'm asking you professionally as an architect, given the innovation that we often have to implement as an architect, that there is no other scenario whatsoever. And I'm not even saying if in fact that there is, that the cost would be available to the client, but I first just wanted to know the possibilities in your creative, innovative, and architectural opinion.
That's a tough question. But the reality is you're dealing with a third of the site. And that third of the site, basically plopped in the middle of there, is this tree that's enormous. And you know, I can't say there's nothing impossible in the world, but I can tell you, given the setbacks, given the height restrictions, the likelihood is extraordinarily slim.
So basically, in concluding, see a project that would be able to accommodate 2 trees and not say one of the two.
Possibly accommodate the 2. That, I leave that to the arborist because it is getting closer to it. But tree number 3, I honestly feel is just prohibiting the development of this project.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Repenning.
What are your thoughts on this project being exempt from CEQA?
In the sense of preventing reasonable development, I think this is reasonable. The original house was this configuration. This is smaller than the rest of the houses. I looked on Zemus. I just wanted to see if we were reasonable. So I looked on Zemus. I came in. I was asked to look at this house. I actually came in with, let me take a look at what's around here. So the footprint in terms of the FAR is very low. I mean, part of it is out of necessity because you really can't use much of this part of the lot. But it's very low, 19% is very low, you're allowed 40. I looked at the adjoining properties, north, south, east, and west, it was less than those. I looked at the square footage, above grade square footage, at least that's what you'd find on Zemus, and it was smaller than all of those, so it was reasonable. It's in almost, other than the setbacks, the exact same place as the original house. The original architect knew how to work the site. I mean, it's apparent to me, or became very apparent once I started fooling around with this. And anyway, so I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Anything further? Thank you, sir. Mr. Lostanian, do you have somebody else?
Yeah, we have Mr. McKinley, who's our arborist, and I think he'd like to speak a little bit to the fungus that was found, that's on the health side, and then on the kind of more building side for him to address trees 1 and 2, to a lesser extent 3, but 1 and 2, and why cutting the root structure and all that is going to affect that that retaining wall, which is right under those trees.
President James, commissioners, city staff, my name is William McKinley. I represent the arborist consulting firm of McKinley and Associates. And I appreciate the passion that the community has expressed in concern with these trees. I find that rather welcome, and I wish I found more of that in the development community. But be that as it may, there have to be some observations made and clarifications. Just because a tree looks healthy and is attractive doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. I know that when I first walked up to the property, I personally liked the appearance of these trees. But as I began inspecting the trees closer, I found some things that concerned me. And it would have been very easy for me to prepare a arborist report and say, well, this is the impact that the project is going to have on the trees. And this is why the trees need to be removed or the project needs to be redesigned. But I'm trained to go and look deeper. And so when I first observed trees number 1 and 2, I was very concerned because I saw a lot of the bark tissue falling off the tree, literally. And the bark was discolored. It was abnormal looking. I have one of these trees, a large one in my front yard. My tree doesn't look like this. Okay, so I was concerned about that. So that's when I began taking samples. And my only mistake or error was that with the white mycelium that I saw and the exfoliating bark tissue, I just presumed that this was oak root fungus, when in fact there are many, many different kinds of fungi, and oftentimes they mimic one another. So I apologize for that, but be that as it may, the fungus is present. That's number one. Number two, tree number 3 was a little bit more subtle. I saw some unusual signs. I saw bark that was missing from one of the large buttress roots on the tree. I saw seams or cracks that can sometimes hide decay inside, and I found where seedlings had actually been germinating and growing in these areas. That's unusual, particularly for this kind of tree. And then I was asked to do a more in-depth tissue sampling of particularly tree number 3. And I was surprised when I did my sampling on the north side of the tree that I found when I removed some rather suspicious looking bark area that I actually saw white latex-like matty material underneath the surface. And that is very unusual in itself. And also, adjacent to those white blotchy areas that I uncovered, I also could observe that in the normal-looking tree tissue, I could actually see white little striations or infiltration of this fungi into the tree's interior tissue. So this concerned me even more. So when I sent these out to the lab, first of course I was asking for testing on oak root fungus. Well, that came back negative, but in further in-depth analysis done by Dr. Heather Vallier, who is a PhD in plant pathology, she found on her own evidence of 2 other types of fungi, which are white rots and wood rotters, the Phalinus and the Anonus. And then, interestingly enough, this third lab that did the testing that claimed that there was a negative on those 2, they found a third fungus, this Hericium. And as Mr. Tyson mentioned, it is and I did some preliminary research because I've never heard of it, but it is a fungus that is present on decaying, rotting tissue. According to the article, it's found in declining trees or dead trees. So my concern is, why is this fungus present in a quote-unquote healthy tree? So that's just my concern. Do I think that the tree's going to fall down anytime in the immediate future? No, I don't. But I have to state for the record, that just because you can test a tree and it seems fairly firm and solid, there's no guarantee that there could be more decay going on much deeper in the tree that we weren't able to observe or test for. And this is a concern where, like this afternoon or this evening, we're supposed to get somewhere between 60 and 80 mile an hour Santa Ana winds. So that is a concern for me as an arborist. Now, I'd also like to address the development issues. The present design with respect to tree number 3 involves excavation for a basement. It's less than 5 feet from the nearest edge of the trunk of the tree. Could be even shorter than that. And so you're going to be removing a majority of the tree's root system. It's going to be less than the minimum standard that is advocated, which it would be less than 3 times the trunk diameter. So there would be severe root loss, and that coupled with other factors, which we've just got through mentioning here, would spell virtually the death of the tree. I just couldn't support the idea that the tree could be preserved based on the present design. In addition to the root loss, the city is requiring excavation and filling and recompaction, and that alone can cause other types of root rotting fungi, such as Phytophthora, which is caused by soil compaction and soil fill and that type of thing over a tree's root system. So I just don't see how, given the present situation, that tree number 3 could be preserved. With respect to trees number 1 and 2, those 2 trees are going to, based on the present design, they're going to be experiencing severe root loss and also possibly some grading activity within their drip lines and their tree protection zones. So with respect to those 2 trees, I would say that it would be a severe impact to those trees and could potentially ultimately result in their decline and death. I think I've covered basically all of it, other than to say in closing that my firm is based on ethics and integrity. I would not misrepresent or mislead this board or the city or my client for any amount of money. It's not worth it to me. It's simply not worth it. And so what I've stated here is my honest professional opinion, regardless of who's paying me. And lastly, with respect to the fungus issue, I want to close by saying that there was a statement by a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who said that I may not be able to define it or state it, but I know it when I see it. And I would use that analogy here with respect to fungus. Can I answer any questions?
Yes. Commissioner Davis.
It appears to me that you have concluded, and I hope I'm naming the trees numerically correct, the tree 1 and 2, in long term, you don't anticipate any bright future for them. And that tree 3, which I think you started talking about first, that you described with a different fungi that you have identified, certainly doesn't have any potential to survive, and that you anticipate that it wouldn't be safe to leave it. Is that pretty much accurate in terms of your assessment?
Based on the present conditions and the design, I don't think these trees have a long future.
Let me ask you in terms of fungi. The third tree, I guess that's the correct number. You talked about these different kind of fungi, some of which you may not be very specific in terms of identifying specifically the kind of fungi that they are. Do you, to your knowledge, know if there is any treatment for trees who have fungi? And the second question is, have we provided treatment to fungi on trees before? And is there any success anywhere in the world that you know of?
With respect to the types of fungi that have been identified, these are wood rotting fungi, and they permeate and invade into tree tissue, sapwood, heartwood, and the biggest concern is heartwood infection and degradation, because what these fungi do, they get into the cells of the wood, and they begin to decompose these tissues, and over a period of time you lose structural integrity. We've all seen wood that's been rotted away on termites and dry rot sort of thing, so sure, we can understand that basic premise. And this is basically the same thing. Fungus oftentimes is a very slow moving kind of invasion. It can take decades. Sure. So even though the tissue on the trees at the present time appears to be relatively firm, we don't really know what's going on down below or deeper into the trees.
My question is around treatment.
There is no chemical treatment that I'm aware of for wood rotting fungi. Okay. If this was Phytophthora, which is a soil-borne root infection, there is a chemical treatment for that, but that's not what was identified here.
And so in terms of the fungi, there is nothing that arborists are able to, I don't even know who the person that would treat a tree is, but whomever it is, there's nothing that we use to help manage trees when they have diseases. Is that correct?
As far as chemical treatment goes, that's correct. There are
any other kind of treatment other than chemical, perhaps?
Well, we do environmental things to try to sustain trees longer, such as making sure that the irrigation system is not watering within the last 6 to 10 feet of the trunk of the trees. On big trees like this, the large woody roots support the trees, and also the trunk area needs to remain dry. And so if it's constantly wetted, which these trees were, because of the way the landscaping was set up, then it encourages infection and decay. So those are types of things that we do to try to prolong a tree's existence, so keep it dry. Also, we do a lot of corrective or structural type pruning on the trees to try to lessen loads and allow wind movement through the trees to try to sustain them. It's a delicate balance because trees need foliage in order to stay healthy and also fight off infection.
So in your professional opinion, can we save any of these trees?
Based on the present design, I would have to say no.
Absolutely none of them?
Based on the present design.
No, I'm not asking about the design. I'm asking about your arboristic opinion, not the design. As an arborist, as you look at these trees, the pathology of the disease, and the potential for not only tree 3, which you've talked about, but tree 1 and 2, which we talked about earlier in this hearing. As an arborist, is there any scenario by which we could save 1 and 2?
I think we could prolong their existence, perhaps.
How would we briefly do that?
We'd have to completely modify the landscape environment around the trees, as I just stated, so that the area within the last 6 to 10 feet is not irrigated or watered at all. The area stays totally dry, and that will help retard or at least not allow fungi to advance further. It would be a more hostile environment for the fungi, let's put it that way.
Sure.
Also, we wouldn't want to restrict grading and that kind of activity within the as much of the tree's root zone or drip line as possible, because through either root loss or through soil compaction, this is going to add further stress to the trees. It's going to weaken the trees, and it's going to allow the fungi that are already present in the trees to further encroach into the trees, because the defense
I
system's been
appreciate your
compromised.
integrity. And to that end, when we talk about this whole public policy issue of protected trees, that kind of an opinion is something that we would have loved to have explored. And now that you have mentioned it, I think that we need to consider if, in fact, at any possible decision, we can help at least to preserve 1 and 2, because they're protected trees. And the core value of the neighborhood, clearly, as you know why you're here, is because they want to save the trees. So I appreciate your being forthright and discussing with us that remote possibility, because I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Anything further? Commissioner Jacinto.
President James, if we're done with the third speaker on behalf of the applicant, I want to try to see if we can call back Tim Tyson.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Any other questions for the arbiter? Okay. Go ahead, the arborist, I should say. Mr. Tyson.
Tim, given I understand the Bureau's recommendation regarding the tree removal, and I'm sort of struggling or dealing with the issue of regional development versus that redesign.
Correct.
Can you comment, as head of our Urban Forestry Division, your professional opinion or any comments related to the fact that there is an opinion that there's no redesign without impacting tree number 3, and so being that there's no reasonable redesign, that the argument would be we should allow tree 3 to be removed.
That is correct.
And you have no other thoughts about that? That's basically.
Well, I'm not an architect. It's designed buildings and this and that, but looking at what the setbacks are and these kind of things and how large the home is going to be, which is smaller than most of the homes in the neighborhood, and the fact that they should be able and be allowed to build a home, of course, we feel that at the Bureau that's correct. Okay. Tree number 3 should be removed. And also, as Mr. McKinley was commenting about trees number 1 and 2, remember in this Bartlett tree expert determination of the diagnosis, it said possibly Hermician is actually there, and that would be spores, just like when Dr. Valier suggested she saw Philenius and Nodorodorus, which actually aren't there, but they all resemble each other. So that's maybe where she misdiagnosed what she saw. But the DNA tests are way better than just looking through a microscope. So it's pretty sure of what was found. Spores of that nature of the Hermicium fungus are there around the trees, but there's no active decay in the tree. And the spore needs active decay to attach itself to so that it can actually start growing a mushroom on the side of the trees. And that would cause further internal decay. And these are the kind of things that, as an arborist, these are the kind of things you monitor trees for. And trees like number 1 and 2, they went in and they did a lot of work around the trees already, which would have been better had they not done that, because then they could have worked a little bit better with the trees in retaining them and changing their design a little bit. The recommended best management practice is 3 to 5 times the width of the trunk diameter is how far you need to stay away from the tree trunk, and that's called the critical root zone. The protected root zone is the entire canopy of the tree, which is much larger. But work can be sustained, done under the canopy of the tree as long as it's monitored and all these kind of things. The tree is viable and healthy. That's where Mr. McKinley would need to be out there when they put the new design together on the driveway, and he needs to be there to watch and see what gets cut, and that would be his job. And we feel that with some minor changes, they need to move that retaining wall at least 6 feet away from the trees and up to 9.
For trees 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tim, for that. Tree number 3.
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. Thank you. We don't have any motions on the floor at this point, but I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. I'm concerned with the categorical exemption. I think that this project likely would be better supported by a mitigated negative declaration at the very least. I'm concerned about the categorical exemption, and for that reason, and I recognize that I don't think we're going to have necessarily a unanimous vote here, which is fine, but I'm not prepared to move forward with granting the tree removal request as recommended by the Bureau. I think we've got too many other environmental issues here. And I'm also not convinced that the property cannot be built without saving the third tree. There are a couple of things just regarding process that concern me regarding the hearing. There was an understanding before that maybe understanding's maybe not the best word, but there was at least a statement from the applicant in the past before that they would try and save trees 1 and 2 when it looked like there was a potential way to work this out. Then when more information came in about the health of the trees that left some doubt, my recollection is there was a backing away from saving trees 1 and 2. The back and forth regarding the health of the trees, which we tried to get and implement. We tried to implement a third-party opinion that's still never good enough for the applicant, which for me is frustrating as well. So with that, I'm concerned about the credibility of the categorical exemption. So I don't think we're on solid environmental grounds here to grant the tree removal permit. So that would be my motion, but I recognize that other people may feel differently. Commissioner Davis, what?
I will based upon our discussion, we probably have some more, and I know it, I really hate to disadvantage the constituent who's come here, and I know it's on a timeline personally, but as we look at the science and what we've not discussed about the trees, I will support that at this point until we can dig a little deeper, because once you cut that tree down, we can't go back and put it there and create a canopy of shade. So I support your motion.
So that's a second on my motion. So my motion is that we deny the request for a tree removal permit as recommended by the Bureau. It is seconded by Commissioner Davis. I think we'll do this with, are you guys clear on that? Mr. Campos, are you clear what my motion is?
Yes. That is to deny the report, all 3 trees, just for the record,
Yes.
1, 2, and 3.
Yes, to deny the requested tree removal permit. I've stated my reasons for it. I don't think we're on solid environmental footing here. Given everything that we've heard, sir, I've got a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. With that, Mr. Jordan?
No, I was just talking to Mr. Campos about the Bureau's recommendation.
Well, I want to make sure that we're clear here.
Okay.
The Bureau's recommendation was to, let me be absolutely clear, was to recommend saving trees 1 and 2.
Correct.
And removing tree 3, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Tyson? Okay.
Okay. That is correct.
My motion is that we deny the tree removal permit as to all 3 protected trees. Are we clear there?
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, got it. Commissioner Davis, is that your second? Okay, that's Commissioner Davis's second. So we will do this vote rather than me just asking for any objections. We'll do this by a show of hands. All those that are in favor of my motion seconded by Commissioner Davis? Okay, that's all 5 of us. Any issue sending it forthwith? We will send it forthwith. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. To get it resolved, I provided a roadmap for that as well.
I'm sorry, Mr. James.
On Kemp Brothers,
I'm really sorry. I have to be heard on this because this is a big issue for us, and we've said
Sir,
unequivocally. I'm sorry, just one comment. Unequivocally, that we, as a matter of settlement and agreement, are fine leaving 1 and 2. We don't believe that it can be done, but if it can be done, we are agreeable to it. And I wanted to make sure the commission did not misconstrue any of that at any time. And if that's the basis for the decision,
I told you the basis for the decision. The basis for the decision is I don't think you're on firm environmental grounds for this tree removal permit. I don't think a categorical exemption, no matter who called for the categorical exemption, is sufficient. Commissioner Penny?
It also, I don't know how we can grant a categorical exemption when we don't even know how many trees are actually being removed. So the back and forth about, well, we don't think they can be saved, or it's not helpful. Asking us to certify CEQA for this project with those questions outstanding is not something that I feel comfortable with at this point.
and I appreciate it, but that issue is not relevant to our position on whether we're agreeable to leaving 1 and 2.
Understood.
We are agreeable, and I want that to be clear. We don't believe it can be done, or there's questions around it, but tree removal on number 3, I believe there's a consensus, or maybe I'm wrong, but I believe there's a consensus among the 5 commissioners that architecturally that can't be done.
No.
That's
Not
not
at
been
all.
controverted.
Not at all.
You have an architect's report in opposition to ours that puts half of the house on a slope. And that was one paragraph that was received, by the way, and I want to protect the record on this, on an untimely basis on Friday, inside of the 5
Sir,
days.
you're speaking outside of the record on this.
Well, regardless, that was an untimely...
The issue was voted on and moved, and you came up to the microphone. So
I
right
appreciate
now you're on Kemp Brothers record.
I appreciate that. I think it's an untimely submission. I don't think it controverted our record on what the architect can and cannot do
just
on
so
that
the
site.
record's clear, I've had doubts about your categorical exemption issue since the first hearing. Moving to agenda item number 1. Gentlemen, did you all have any determination on what you think regarding our offer of $1.3 million?
Yes. So at the outset, I'd like to just thank everybody again for all their consideration, the time spent on this issue.
Can you just state your name for the record, please?
Pardon me?
State your name for the record,
Richard
please.
Trop.
Thank you.
On behalf of Kemp Brothers. Again, thank you for the time consideration on the issue. The offer made by the board is very fair. Before addressing that, there's a couple things I need to clarify. One is earlier the board asked whether Kemp Brothers had received the $750,000 worth of retention that was released at the prior hearing. It has not. It received a reduced check, I think on Friday or late last week. It's hard to tell from the letter that came with the check why that amount was reduced. It seems to be related to a stop notice that had previously been bonded around a long time ago. So just to make the board aware, that money that was released has not been received. Secondly, part of the reason why Kemp is here and aggressively pursuing this is also on behalf of all of its subcontractors who are still very anxious to receive funds, retention funds that everybody's still waiting for. So I know the board is sympathetic to the subcontractors as they form a big part of the team that builds everything that gets built in the city as well as the general contractor. So having said all that, Kemp will agree to $1,358,000 as full and final settlement of its claims. Couple conditions, one being a mutual release that's acceptable, obviously, to both parties. The other being prompt payment by the end of the year, if possible, because, again, everybody's looking at year-end. This money's been out there a long time, so those are the conditions of accepting the proposal.
Fair enough, sir. Let me, Mr. Kawaguchi, perhaps Mr. Smith, who's here. I don't know if that involves you, Chris. Regarding the issue of the retention funds, that issue is kind of, don't take me wrong, it's an important issue to them, but it doesn't affect, these are retention funds, it doesn't affect the settlement of the case that we're trying to do. Is there a reason there was a delay in sending over the retention funds? Does it just take time, or?
Okay, my understanding from what occurred is, first of all, they are related to each other. I mean, retention is kept so that we can make sure the project's finished.
I understand that, but sending them shouldn't have been held up because we hadn't finished resolving the issue.
No, I believe what I had heard from accounting was that there was another stop notice payment that was in there, and that was supposed to be trying to be worked out. They did bond around the big one that was from Neil Electric for 1.4, but there's another $300 and something thousand one that's in there, but we can work on that. I think if the settlement's agreed to, I think that clears up a lot of things because the county's trying to balance the books on all the different sides. Do we hold enough money to make sure the work is finished? We still have outstanding work that needs to be done. I think if
so my intent at making a motion that we that we return the retention funds within this, one, my understanding was that we would still have enough money kept on retention to resolve the matter, and two, it was to provide some relief to show good faith.
It was supposed to, yes.
If we were unable to do so, I would like to have known about it, before we made the motion that we approved and made the representation.
I apologize. I was not involved in the release of retention. That normally goes through ConAd and then over to accounting.
Okay, so Mr. Campos?
Yeah, Mr. President, Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. If you'd like, I can personally follow up with this to make sure that the difference of the 750, I'm hearing that it wasn't fully released. I can follow up by the end of the week to make sure that is happening. But just to clarify for the record, we do have 2 stop notices on file, one for $1.1 million and some change, and that was from Neil Electric Corporation. There was a bond submitted for that, so we are working around that. In addition to that, we do have a second stop notice for about $300,000. It's from Digital Network Group on behalf of Neal Electric Corporation as well. That has not been bonded around, and we are holding about $372,000 around that. So even though this board may consider moving forward with the settlement, I would still have to hold that $371,000 on hold until there's either a release of the stop notice or two, Kemp Brothers submits a new bond to bond around this new dollar amount, 371. However, putting that aside, I will follow up with my accounting staff to make sure what's going on with the $750,000 that was approved by this board.
So, Alan, what of the, and Chris, what of the conditions? The conditions that he's wants a release, okay, that's something we can work on with our city attorney's office. We do those all the time. I don't have an issue with that. But what about payment by the end of the year? And what do these stop notices mean regarding the payment that our representative from Kemp Brothers is asking for?
If I put a con ad on the spot, you guys can address the stop notice and how those work in terms of, because I'm not sure of all the process of it. All I know is that there is one stop notice that hasn't been held, that the county has to keep 125%.
But is the stop notice, because they haven't been paid and they need the money to pay the stop notice?
Yeah, it's kind of that way. I think the sub is saying,
That's
I need
how
to
it
be paid
works.
for this. They haven't been paid, so they pushed a stop notice in.
Okay, so what I would ask Mr. Jordan is, we all know what we want to do here.
Correct.
We want to, I think I've got an acceptance of the $1,358,000. And if we can do that, and we can we bring in the stop notices as part of the global resolution here?
Well, you need to have the person that filed the stop notice.
We'd have a person what?
Whoever filed that stop notice
Yeah.
has to release it. Or a bond has to be posted to that safeguards the right of the stop notice filer to be paid.
Okay, what would be the cost to you, sir, on the bond to cover the stop notice? Because I'm going to add that to the settlement.
Release bond is around 1% of the value.
I mean, because we could, if it's going to be.
Yeah, that stop notice, the first stop notice, or the second stop notice was filed on July 21st, 2017. It was filed by Digital Networks Group on behalf of Neal Electric Corporation for $297,114. So to answer your question, Mr. President, if Kemp Brothers were to file a bond, we can quickly agendize that before the end of the calendar year, and then from there we would be able to release that payment before the end of the calendar year.
Most likely, that amount of money is duplicative of what's in Neal's larger stop notices. I'm sure it covers everything they owe downstream. But I don't think you were aware of that stop notice. And that's probably why when the check came and it was less than $750, Kemp didn't know why, but there was still another $1 million in retention or more, from which that money could easily have been withheld. It didn't need to impact the just got to 750. We still have over $1 million. That was more than enough to cover the stop notice.
Okay, so if we have a settlement agreement, Alan, can we release the retention funds?
I think as a condition, I think we would sit and say, once the change orders are all signed, yeah, I think that at that point we could release. I'm asking Catalina Con Ad too. No, okay. Frank, you may want to chime in on the release of retention, or Chris?
They need to submit their final subcontracting reports and their certified payrolls, and we need to hold funds to cover any amount that might potentially be in dispute. So we wouldn't be able to release it all until we get that documentation, and we can go through the process of making sure that it's all right.
We could release the balance, though, correct?
We could release any undisputed amount.
Okay, do we have any idea what the ballpark on undisputed amounts is right now?
No, because that analysis doesn't start until the project is accepted and we receive, the change orders are processed, and we receive all of the documentation we need from the contractor and their subs.
Okay, so how long would it take for you to submit what they need to close out the item?
Can I add something? I don't know.
Yeah.
You can add to it. I don't know how quickly they can do it, because they would have to first get the change order issued. And then at that point, they would have to, I'm not sure if they'd have to get their money in their hands, and then they would be settling with all your subs, correct? Once they have that settlement with all the subs, now they have all the labor numbers they can turn into Con Ed to finish off the project. So it's kind of those steps issues, because that's kind of why Con Ed holds off on that very last, because they don't know how the change orders are going to go in terms of what's going to be settled on.
Well, it sounds like it makes sense, at least for us. You can let me know if it does for you. It sounds to me like it makes sense for us to get agreement on a number. Because if we get agreement on the number, and let's say it's the $1,358,000, then all these other events can start to occur. And that's why I'm concerned about the conditions. I mean, we're not out to try and mess with you guys. We're trying to get this resolved. So I'd like to, if we could get agreement on a number, then we can work to get all of this resolved as soon as possible. What I don't know that we can do, because we're 21 days away from, well, that's Christmas Day, but we're 28 days away roughly from the end of the year, 27 days. I don't know that we can, and our last meeting is December 18th until after the New Year holiday. Maybe January 3rd we're back. But I don't know how I can put it on a condition that we can get all of this paperwork done by then. What I would represent to you is that we could get it done as soon as possible, depending upon how quickly you all can get. And I would instruct our accounting department to prioritize it, as well as our bureaus, to put it on top of the stack.
So I guess what I would say is just the amount of retention. The amount of retention hasn't changed in over a year. The amount that's been sitting in retention. Now if we're agreeing on a value for a final change order, so we have two pots of money. We have our retention. We have an agreed upon amount for a final change order. They're not related. If we can agree on a value for $1,358,000 to settle out our claims, and we can get an appropriate release, there's no reason I don't think why that money couldn't be funded. Or on the other hand, there's $1.8 million plus in retention that's still sitting there, less what Kemp just received. If you think there's some closeout document issues that have some value to them, put a number on it. Give us the balance.
Well, so we can release any undisputed funds. The number that we can't, quote unquote, we can't put a value on without your help are these timesheets and things that Chris was talking about, because it's your company, they're your employees and your subs. So we need that closeout info from the company. But we can still reach an agreement, can we not, on the value of their claim. I mean, that's what seems to make sense to me, that we can make an agreement on the value of your claim at $1,358,000. Then everything else at that point, gentlemen, please let me know if I'm wrong. If we reach that agreement today here, everything else is administrative, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So my recommendation would be that we, and recognizing that we'll get you release language. Mr. Jordan's office does those regularly. Am I right about that, Mr. Jordan?
Yes. I mean, there's things that get released and there's things that will not be released, but yeah.
Yeah. But those are very standard for us with contractors.
Absolutely. I didn't mean to suggest that there's anything that would be out of the ordinary. For example,
it's standards.
Warranty issues and things like that.
Yeah. So the release is not a concern. My only concern, because of the amount of administrative work, is hitting the December 31 date. I can make the representation to you that we will try, and I can instruct everybody to prioritize, but I don't want to blow up this deal because we missed December 31. That's why making it a condition is a problem. If we're not done by January 3rd, we'll be back on January 3rd, won't we, Mr. Campos? Yes. We'll be back on January 3rd. We're only 3 days out at that point, and you know, if we need to, we can figure out kind of where we are by then.
President James,
Yeah.
I was talking to Chris from Con Ed, and, you know, we can issue the change order, you know, for the 1.3 probably this week.
Okay.
At that point, there's a billing cycle they could probably get probably all of it is my thinking.
Hey, guys, can you guys...
The retention item is the number that is hard for us to hold, and so
Yeah.
but I think that could be resolved very quickly after January 1, just because of the holidays are in there.
Yeah, so what Mr. Kawaguchi, did you hear what he just said? Alan, go ahead and repeat what you just said.
We can issue the change order for the 1.3 this week. So if you sign it, then to me, that could be processed. I would imagine they should be to get that paid this month. The retention is the one that we're playing with.
That gets you the 1.3.
Sure, and like I said, either pot's fine as long as we can get
Yeah.
something by the end of the year. Now,
Because that gets you your 1.3, and you can resolve your stop notice issues with that, right?
They could begin to.
probably, yes.
Yeah.
Probably. You know, I'm not sure what the stub notice is based on, so we'd have to look into that. But would the change order contain the release language? Is that the idea? It's going to be that one document?
No, the change order that we would have would be to settle the claim that you have for the 1.8, all RFIs, all plan clarifications, all time extensions, all those. That's what it would contain. It'd stop right there. It doesn't contain any labor issues or any disputed that you have with your sub. We're not settling those for you.
We still need that done, but
I guess maybe I'm directing that to the city attorney more than are you contemplating one document that's going to be a final change order with a release or separate documents that are going to...
Well, the change order it would be clear that it doesn't include, you know, the Bureau of Contract Administration issues, you know, labor, subcontractor, but it would represent the final resolution of the work and scope, so the city would not come back later and say, oh yeah, hold on, there's still something else you need to do. So it would be the city releasing any future claim that, oh yeah, there was some element of work that you know you haven't done yet. It would clarify all of that. So we wouldn't be talking about, you know, who has to do the rock art. That would be my understanding of the mutual release. It would
Also would prevent them from coming back and putting a claim into the city later on the project.
Yes.
The language is in the change order.
Correct.
It resolves it.
Each side would be fully agreeing on what the scope of the project was and how much time. But what wouldn't be released are things that may come up later, like if something falls down and there's a warranty issue, or if it turns out a subcontractor wasn't paid the right amount or wasn't used in the right amount. Those issues would remain open, but that's what the Bureau of Contract Administration does when it does all of its final closing out of the project after reviewing payroll records and subcontractor utilization numbers.
So there's going to be a final change order from the city, additional release that's going to deal with issues. Are you saying there's not going to be?
I'll talk to the Bureau. I think it could be, we could have some language in that change order, but I'll talk to the Bureau about it. I think we're all in agreement in the basic concept.
so are we clear that on the $1,358,000, we need to take a vote on it if that's something that you all will accept to close out those claims?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Al.
Just for clarification for camp, we did issue a unilateral allowance deductive change order. I wanted to make sure they understood because allowances are typically money we set in the contract that we say for certain work. If the work wasn't done, we say that we want the money back, and that's set in the allowances. The last discussion that I had heard was they said Kemp didn't want to sign the deductive because they said they didn't know the outcome of this meeting, so we issued it unilaterally. I didn't want that to get mixed up for someone saying, well, gee, there's $71,000 that you still owe us. So we need to make sure that's clear. Nigel's nodding, he understands. That's not going to be something you can come back and say, by the way, the city went and deducted $71,000 off of our settlement.
Right, but we have our agreement with the gentleman here from Kemp that they understand your point on that.
As long as you understand, I just want to make sure. I've had that.
Allowance belongs to the city.
Right.
I've had that unwind everything where someone says
That's
we
unanimous
expected
there. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so then my motion would be, and I think it was seconded by Commissioner Davis, the $1,358,000. Colleagues, any thoughts, any questions, any concerns on that?
No, I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay. So the motion was seconded, and the vote was unanimous on that. We can send that forthwith, Alan, for you all.
That's not a problem. The only thing I'd ask administratively is that accounting work with us on the numbers, because you had said what the $1 million was on the contingencies.
Yes.
That's to make all of our books balance.
Yes.
And we would have to work with them since you've changed the number.
Yes, all those
I don't want
numbers.
to work it out right now, but
Right.
I'm just saying as long as you give us the authority to work with accounting, we can get that all settled out.
Yes.
And also for the record, just this report would be adopted as amended with the series of recommendations that were read into the record earlier in the hearing session.
Exactly. And Dr. Campos, those numbers would
Will
revise themselves accordingly.
Absolutely, yes.
Correct.
And-
we can work with them on that.
And accounting has been requested by our board to prioritize that work through Dr. Campos, who oversees the accounting department with us, and he works with them daily. So
No problem.
that,
I just want to make sure
that
that's
will
done.
get done, and you're in excellent hands there. Okay. I think that we're done with this. We will put it on the agenda, though, for a status update on January 3rd. And if everything's done, you all don't need to be here. And if there are some things that are outstanding, then we can, help people along with a status update on January 3rd. Okay? Thank you. We appreciate your patience with the process and your work with us on it. Mr. Kawaguchi, to your team, Mr. Smith, thank you all both. Frank, thank you, Mr. Rinaldi, as well. And we are made progress on getting this one with a bow on it. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Campos, have we cleared the desk today?
Yes, you have.
Okay, we are adjourned.